Hello, graceful Libra. Some of life's most important turning points don't announce themselves with dramatic moments that everyone remembers. More often, they unfold quietly, hidden inside ordinary days when you choose understanding over reaction, patience over frustration, and compassion over the impulse to let everything fall apart. You may believe you already know the greatest challenge you faced, but what if it was never the event everyone witnessed? What if it was the hundreds of silent decisions to remain steady when no one realized how close you were to reaching your limit? People have often described you as calm, diplomatic, or naturally balanced, as though creating peace simply comes effortlessly to you. Yet those descriptions rarely acknowledge what that peace has asked of you. There is a quiet difference between appearing composed and carrying the emotional weight of a room so skillfully that no one notices it exists. Over time, you may have learned to protect harmony by quietly absorbing tensions that were never truly yours to hold. The symbol of Libra has never been a pair of scales frozen in perfect stillness. A scale remains balanced because it is constantly making subtle adjustments, responding to even the smallest shift in weight. In much the same way, your emotional world often works through countless invisible corrections. Long before disagreement becomes conflict, you instinctively notice changing expressions, unfinished sentences, or the silence that tells you something beneath the surface has changed. Rather than reacting, you naturally begin searching for the words, the timing, or the gesture that might restore equilibrium. That ability is often mistaken for simple kindness, but it reflects something much deeper. It speaks to a sensitivity that notices imbalance before others become aware of it themselves. While this gift has allowed you to create understanding where others saw division, it has also encouraged a habit of quietly redistributing emotional burdens until everyone else feels lighter. Somewhere along the way, your own place in that equation became easier to overlook. Nature offers a reminder that balance is never created through rigidity. A river remains clear because it keeps moving, adjusting its course around stones instead of resisting every obstacle. Trees survive powerful winds, not because they refuse to bend, but because flexibility allows them to remain rooted. Your strength has often worked in the same quiet way. It has never depended on becoming emotionally unshakable. It has come from your remarkable ability to adapt without losing your desire for connection. Still, every living system has moments when it asks for attention. Perhaps you've recognized them without fully understanding what they meant. The unexpected exhaustion after spending the day supporting everyone else. The desire to cancel plans you once looked forward to. The feeling of wanting just a little silence. Not because you wished to escape your life, but because your inner world needed room to breathe again. It is easy to dismiss those moments as stress or temporary fatigue. Yet they may also be gentle signals that your own balance has been carrying more than it was ever meant to hold alone. If you think back, you'll probably remember more than one occasion when an entire conversation remained peaceful because you quietly guided it there. You may have noticed yourself choosing words with extraordinary care, protecting relationships that others didn't even realize were becoming fragile. Those moments reveal a rare emotional intelligence, but they also reveal something else. Every act of maintaining harmony requires energy, even when the effort remains completely invisible to everyone around you. Perhaps this is why your greatest lesson has never been learning how to carry more. Instead, it has been learning to recognize the moment when preserving everyone else's balance begins to pull you away from your own. There is an important distinction between generosity and self-forgetting, and Libra often spends years discovering where that line truly rests. Bringing yourself back into the equation is not an act of selfishness. It is simply another expression of the balance you have always sought. If these thoughts stir something within you, there may be a reason for that. Sometimes awareness arrives quietly, almost like the first light before sunrise. Nothing outside has changed yet, but something inside begins to see itself more clearly. That feeling doesn't ask you to become someone different. It simply invites you to remember that the person who has spent so much time helping others find stability also deserves a place within that same circle of care. Before this feeling quietly slips into the background of another busy day, pause with it for a moment. Notice what it is trying to tell you, instead of rushing to explain it away. And if this reflection speaks to your own experience, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. When was the last time you held an entire situation together without anyone realizing how much it asked of you? One of the quiet truths about emotional resilience is that it rarely disappears without warning. Long before anything truly falls apart, small signals begin to appear beneath the surface. For Libra, those signals often arrive so gently that they blend into everyday life: a sudden desire to cancel plans you were once excited about, an irritation that feels strangely unlike you, or a tiredness that lingers no matter how much you rest. Over time, you probably learn to interpret those moments as personal shortcomings. You tell yourself you're simply stressed, overwhelmed, or having an off day. But what if those feelings aren't evidence that you're failing? What if there's simply your inner world asking for the same care and attention you spend years giving to everyone around you? Think of a beautifully balanced structure standing through changing seasons. From a distance, it appears effortless, yet beneath that calm exterior, countless adjustments are happening every moment. Strength isn't measured by pretending nothing is happening. It's sustained because someone notices the subtle shifts before they become serious. The same is true for you. You know the difference between functioning well and quietly pushing yourself beyond your limits, even if no one else ever sees it. There have been ordinary days when you smiled, finished every responsibility, listened patiently, and offered reassurance, while inside you felt as though one more request might be enough to drain the last of your energy. The remarkable part is that others rarely recognize the difference because you've become exceptionally skilled at carrying pressure without allowing it to spill into the world around you. That ability deserves admiration, but it also deserves honesty. Living with occasional pressure is part of life. Living inside constant pressure is something entirely different. One is temporary. The other slowly becomes so familiar that you stop noticing how much it has reshaped your inner landscape. Perhaps your greatest lesson has never been learning to endure more. Perhaps it has been learning to recognize the moment when endurance quietly turns into exhaustion. If you look back, you may notice how often those quiet warnings have appeared. Maybe it was canceling plans you genuinely wanted to keep because you no longer had anything left to give. Maybe it was becoming unexpectedly irritated by something small when the real source of your discomfort had been building for weeks. Or perhaps it was choosing silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because you no longer had the energy to hold another difficult conversation together. These experiences don't always arrive with clear explanations. They often disguise themselves as work stress, temporary fatigue, or a passing emotional slump. And sometimes that's exactly what they are. Yet there is another possibility worth considering. Have you noticed how often those moments appear after you've spent hours restoring balance for everyone else while quietly setting your own needs aside? Libra is often gifted with an extraordinary awareness of emotional shifts. You can sense tension in a room before a single word is spoken, and you instinctively begin adjusting your own responses to help restore harmony. It's a beautiful strength, but it becomes incomplete if that same awareness never turns inward. A scale cannot remain balanced if it only measures one side. Real resilience isn't about ignoring your limits until they force themselves to be seen. It begins with recognizing those limits, while you still have the freedom to respond with kindness instead of necessity. For those who spend so much of their lives caring for others, learning to notice their own inner signals may be one of the rarest and most meaningful forms of wisdom they will ever develop. This is where a deeper understanding begins to matter. Growth is rarely about learning how to carry even more than you already do. More often, it comes from recognizing the quiet moment when what once reflected resilience has gradually become exhaustion. There is a subtle line between strength and overextension, and it often disappears so slowly that you don't realize you've crossed it until your spirit begins asking for something different. For people who naturally care for everyone around them, that realization can take years to arrive because their attention is almost always directed outward before it ever turns inward. They become so accustomed to reading the emotional landscape of others that they rarely pause long enough to notice the changing seasons within themselves. There is another truth about your kindness that often goes unnoticed. People see your patience, your grace, and your willingness to understand different perspectives, but they rarely see the strength supporting those qualities beneath the surface. Like a beautifully finished piece of craftsmanship, the polished exterior draws every eye, while the framework carrying the real weight remains hidden. Because that effort is invisible, it is easy for others, and sometimes even for you, to forget that it exists at all. Your calm presence can create the illusion that peace simply follows you wherever you go, when in reality much of that peace has been carefully cultivated through countless thoughtful choices that no one else ever had to witness. One of your quiet gifts is that you rarely fall apart in dramatic ways. Instead, you instinctively begin redistributing your energy. If one part of your life becomes too demanding, you compensate somewhere else. You give a little less to your hobbies, a little less to rest, a little less to your own emotional needs, so that your relationships, responsibilities, and commitments continue to function. It is an extraordinary form of emotional adaptability, yet every adjustment asks something of you in return. Without even realizing it, you become an expert at preserving the appearance of balance while quietly borrowing energy from parts of yourself that also deserve care and attention. Over time, those small sacrifices accumulate almost unnoticed. Nothing seems to collapse overnight, and from the outside your life may continue to look beautifully balanced. Yet beneath that appearance, a quiet weariness can settle in, not because you lack strength, but because you've been asking the same inner resources to stretch further and further without giving them the chance to recover. What makes this kind of exhaustion especially difficult to recognize is that it arrives gradually. It becomes woven into your daily routine until fatigue begins to feel familiar, almost like another responsibility you've simply learned to carry. Perhaps the more meaningful question is not how much longer you can continue carrying this weight. Perhaps it is whether you've ever paused to ask where the weight truly comes from in the first place. Solving the symptom is very different from understanding the source, and Libra often becomes so skilled at restoring balance around them that they forget to investigate what has gradually unsettled their own. Sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is not immediately finding another solution, but becoming curious enough to ask why the same burdens continue returning in different forms. Some forms of exhaustion never announce themselves dramatically. Relationships can slowly lose their warmth without a single argument, because the person quietly holding space for everyone else has simply reached the edge of what they can give. Creative projects may lose their momentum not because inspiration disappeared, but because the one keeping everything connected has been running on emotional reserves for far too long. These changes are subtle, unfolding so gradually that they can easily be mistaken for ordinary phases of life. A conversation becomes shorter than usual. A hobby that once brought joy quietly fades into the background. Even moments of solitude begin to feel less like rest and more like recovery from a marathon no one else realized you were running. This tendency reflects one of Libra's greatest strengths and one of its greatest challenges. You have an uncommon ability to adjust, to rebalance, and to help restore harmony wherever you go. The challenge begins only when that remarkable ability quietly transforms into the belief that you must always be the one making every adjustment, regardless of the personal cost. Those are not the same thing. One is a gift, the other is an expectation that may have taken root so slowly you never questioned it. Over time, what began as generosity can quietly become identity, making it difficult to distinguish between who you truly are and the role you've learned to fulfill for everyone around you. Think about the words you've probably heard throughout your life. You'll figure it out. You always know how to make things work. Everything feels calmer when you're here. They sound like compliments, and in many ways they are, yet when repeated often enough, they can also become an invisible role you begin performing without realizing you've accepted it. Little by little, maintaining everyone else's balance starts to feel less like a choice and more like a responsibility you simply cannot put down. Even when no one explicitly asks you to carry the emotional weight of a situation, those familiar expectations can quietly encourage you to step into that role before anyone else even notices it needs filling. Real healing begins when you recognize that caring for yourself is not another obligation to squeeze into an already crowded life. It is part of the very balance you have always been seeking. The scales cannot remain true if one side is continually asked to support the other without ever receiving equal attention. Including yourself in that equation does not diminish your kindness. It allows that kindness to become sustainable. In many ways, the compassion you offer the world becomes even more genuine when it grows from a place of inner stability rather than quiet depletion. There is another lesson hidden in nature. Living things survive because they remain responsive, not because they become rigid. Trees bend with the wind. Rivers reshape themselves around obstacles. Even the scales that symbolize Libra are always making tiny adjustments rather than freezing into perfect stillness. Lasting balance is created through movement, not through resistance. Nature never mistakes flexibility for weakness. Instead, it reveals again and again that what continues to adapt is often what continues to endure. Season after season, long after rigid structures have begun to crack. You may have tried becoming emotionally harder at some point. Perhaps you decided you would stop caring so deeply, stop feeling the atmosphere in every room, or stop carrying the emotions of those around you. It may have seemed like the safest path for a while. Yet if that version of yourself felt strangely unfamiliar, it is because your deepest strength has never come from building thicker walls. It has always come from your remarkable ability to remain open, thoughtful, and adaptable without losing sight of what truly matters. Your heart was never meant to become smaller in order to survive. Its greatest strength has always been its ability to remain generous while gradually learning that generosity must include the person who has been carrying everyone else for so long. Perhaps you've already discovered something that has always been difficult to put into words. The moments when you tried to become emotionally untouchable may have been the very moments that left you feeling the most disconnected from yourself. Closing your heart might have seemed like the safest form of protection, yet it often demanded far more energy than remaining open ever did. Every wall you built may have shielded you from disappointment for a while, but it also kept you at a distance from the part of yourself that naturally finds meaning through connection. That hardened version of you wasn't your natural strength. It was simply a response to carrying too much for too long, a survival strategy that appeared when your spirit needed relief but didn't yet know another way to find it. Your resilience has never come from refusing to bend. It has come from your ability to move with life's changing winds without losing your center. Like branches that sway during a storm or water that reshapes itself around stone, your nature has always understood that flexibility is not surrender. It is one of the quietest forms of endurance, practiced so consistently that few people ever recognize the effort behind it. There is wisdom in knowing when to soften instead of resist, when to listen instead of react, and when preserving what matters is more valuable than proving a point. That quiet adaptability has carried you through moments that looked ordinary from the outside, but demanded extraordinary emotional strength within. When you look back, you may notice how many of your greatest victories passed without applause. They weren't dramatic turning points or unforgettable milestones. They were the ordinary afternoons when you chose patience instead of frustration, compassion instead of resentment, and understanding instead of walking away. They were the conversations where you lowered the emotional temperature without anyone realizing how carefully you chose your words. Those moments rarely attracted attention, yet they quietly shaped the person you become. They became the invisible threads woven through your character, strengthening you little by little until resilience became less of a decision and more of a way of moving through the world. There is a simple truth hidden within that pattern. Every time you believed you needed to become harder in order to prove your strength, you moved further away from what actually sustained you. Yet whenever you allowed difficult emotions to pass through you instead of fighting them, you found your balance again. Feelings, much like changing weather, were never meant to be imprisoned. They were meant to move, to teach, and eventually to pass. What appeared from the outside as uncertainty may have been something far more sophisticated, an instinctive understanding that preserving harmony often requires movement, perspective, and thoughtful adjustment rather than force. Sometimes the strongest response is not immediate certainty, but the patience to let clarity emerge in its own time. This is where astrology offers a meaningful symbol rather than a fixed definition. Libra is often associated with weighing different perspectives, and that quality is sometimes misunderstood as hesitation. Yet there are moments when pausing before acting is not indecision at all. It is the wisdom to recognize that some situations cannot be resolved through rigid certainty because their strength lies in remaining open to more than one truth. The scales do not represent perfection. They represent continual adjustment. Balance is never something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you participate in every day through awareness, reflection, and the willingness to respond instead of simply react. Think about the time someone urged you to choose a side immediately, to stop considering every angle, or to force a conclusion before you felt it was ready. Had you done so, how many delicate connections might have been damaged? How many conversations would have ended instead of evolving? How many relationships survive precisely because you allowed room for understanding instead of insisting on being right? What others occasionally interpreted as weakness may actually have been the quiet intelligence that kept something meaningful intact. There are situations where certainty creates distance, while curiosity creates understanding. Your gift has often been recognizing that difference long before anyone else in the room could see it. Yet there is another lesson waiting beyond that gift. Your identity is larger than the role of being everyone's peacemaker. Offering balance to others is one expression of who you are, but it is not the entirety of your purpose. Genuine kindness does not ask you to disappear inside the needs of everyone else. It invites you to become part of the same compassion you so naturally extend outward. There is an important difference between sharing your light and slowly exhausting it. The first creates connection. The second quietly teaches you to believe that your own needs can always wait. Eventually, even the most generous heart deserves the same understanding it has offered so freely to everyone else. There is a quiet beauty in living things that remain flexible through changing seasons. We admire ancient trees not because they never moved, but because they continued adapting through every storm. Rivers do not lose their strength because they change course around obstacles. Even the scales that represent Libra achieve balance through constant adjustment rather than perfect stillness. Nature reminds us again and again that resilience is a living process, never a rigid state. Everything that continues to thrive does so because it responds to change instead of resisting every shift. There is comfort in remembering that growth rarely looks like standing perfectly still. More often, it looks like learning to move without losing yourself. Perhaps your own life has reflected that truth all along. You have continued showing up, listening carefully, restoring calm where emotions became tangled, and helping people reconnect even when no one noticed the effort those moments required. The greatest test was never one extraordinary event. It was woven through countless ordinary choices that asked you to remain compassionate without losing yourself in the process. Many of those choices were so small they seemed almost insignificant at the time, yet together they formed the quiet architecture of your character. They became evidence of a strength that never needed recognition in order to exist. Maybe this is the right moment to recognize those choices for what they truly were. Not evidence that you should continue carrying every burden alone, but proof that you possess a rare kind of emotional resilience. It has always lived in your willingness to stay present, to adapt without becoming bitter, and to keep your heart open even when life became heavy. Looking back with compassion rather than criticism allows you to see that you have accomplished far more than you once gave yourself credit for. What once felt like ordinary survival now reveals itself as quiet courage practiced over and over again. There is an important difference between a monument and a bridge. A monument is admired because it never moves. A bridge fulfills its purpose because it does. It adjusts to every step, every changing current, every shifting wind while continuing to connect places that would otherwise remain separate. Throughout your life, you have often been that quiet connection for the people around you, helping others find their way without drawing attention to the effort it required. The value of a bridge is rarely measured by those who cross it each day because they naturally assume it will always be there. Yet its true strength lies in the invisible care that allows it to keep serving its purpose through changing seasons. You don't need to stop being that person. The invitation is something much gentler than that. It is to remember that even the strongest bridge is cared for, inspected, and maintained so it can continue serving its purpose for years to come. In the same way, your own inner world deserves the patience, attention, and compassion you so freely offered to others. Caring for yourself does not diminish your ability to care for those you love. In many ways, it protects the very qualities that have always made your presence such a source of comfort and stability. Perhaps the next chapter of your journey is not about becoming stronger than you already are. Perhaps it is about allowing yourself to receive the same balance, understanding, and care that you have spent so many years creating for everyone else. Imagine what might change if the gentleness you offer so naturally became something you also extended toward your own heart. That, too, is part of living in harmony, and it may be the most meaningful balance of all, one that continues to unfold each time you remember that your own well-being has always belonged on the scales alongside everyone else's.